Welcome aboard Clandestine International Airlines, Flight 17. I'm your captain, Otto Excelsior, and our co-pilot today and electronics warfare officer is Roger Hansen. We are en route to Shambhala International Airport and at undisclosed location somewhere high in the Himalayan or possibly the Himalayan mountains. If you know how to pronounce that, please mention it in the comment section. We always like comments. Like, subscribe, of course. And we've got good weather ahead, it looks like, on the report. There might be a little bit of turbulence, but we have reached our cruising altitude of 32,000 feet. So I am going to turn off the seatbelt light so you can unbuckle your seatbelts, get up, stretch, walk around. Please check out our lounge on the upper deck. And, of course, the smoking lamp is now lit. Smoke them if you've got them. And I'm going to activate the automatic pilot. So there we go. Roger, good to have you back with us this week.
Good to be here. Been a long week. Seems forever. Or seems like it's been forever, I should say.
Yeah, it has. It has. It's amazing the nature of time, and maybe we'll talk about that a little more later. But we've both been pretty busy. You've had a lot on your plate lately, haven't you?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's not really a lot, but it is. You know what I mean? Because I was finally able to get that Stir of the Fallout, the first episode out, and that was pretty interesting. I'll just put it to you that way.
That's an amazing project, and I urge anyone listening now to check out the Stir the Fallout project.
It came out a lot different than what I had expected, even for myself. I'm the one that was editing it, and man, I'm telling you, it went its own direction. It created its own. Yeah.
The best work is always like that, you know. It still takes on a life of its own. Well, at the risk of bringing it up, that is sort of the third thing, you know, when you've got the creator and creates something, and then it comes into contact with the performance, and then it creates this whole new thing that can be completely out of your control at times.
Yeah, I really do feel that way, to be honest, when it comes to that, because it really feels like it's got a life. It's taken on a life of its own. You know what I mean? Because there's things on it that I didn't expect, and it went from there. So it's pretty interesting.
You know, it's just amazing when it's nice to be surprised like that with something, you know, when you're creating it. It's like, wow. And there, we used to talk about years ago, you probably remembered, what was his name? Pearls, I think. He came up with this thing called Gestalt, which is that something is greater than the sum of its parts, you know, which a human is a good example of that, because we just look at human parts. Well, you got a lot of water, you got some minerals, you got some electricity, put it all together, and you've got Roger Hansen writing Stir the Fallout.
Yeah, that's what it actually feels like. So,
oh, pretty amazing. And you've also been you've been making music, and you've been editing other things too. It's just nonstop.
Oh yeah, and then I just now in the wonderful world of weirdness started putting out strange stories. I started with the conspiracy theories and all that stuff too.
Wow.
Which actually was something that I mentioned this week on Strange Stories, that kind of is something we've been talking about. And it's, have you ever heard of Mount Kailash or Kailash?
Oh, it sounds familiar. Tell me more.
Well, this is a mountain that's supposed to be in Tibet. And it's a mountain that Buddhists, Hindus, the Jains, and the Bon religions, all of them do pilgrimages to it. And when they get there, they walk around it. And I'm not really sure, but I know that the Bons and the Jains walk counterclockwise, I believe.
Yes, I was going to say something about that. I was going to say I would bet you $1 that whatever direction the Buddha circumambulated, the Bons do the opposite. They go and if you're circumambulating a holy shrine. Yeah, in some cultures, you are supposed to do it in a clockwise direction so that your right shoulder is always pointed toward the object that you're going around. So it's sort of like a sign of respect in those cultures.
Hmm.
And you'll see that if you look at traditional Buddhist robes, one arm is bared, and this is bared as a kind of sign of respect. This way, in our culture, we might take our hat off to someone, sort of thing. So they bare their shoulder to someone. But I wasn't sure about the Jains, but I'm not surprised about them either. Um, and it's not unusual to find these shared areas. I mean, Buddhism arose in India, and it is not. I mean, people say, oh, well, it's just kind of like a form of Hinduism, and Hinduism did try to co-opt Buddhism to a certain point. At one point, I think the Hindus claimed that Buddha was an incarnation of Shiva or Vishnu or someone like that, which would complete it. That's not Buddhist.
Hmm.
It's Hindu. It's not Buddhist. But they did share a certain spiritual framework, and that would include a shared reverence for certain holy sites, I'm sure. And I guess we kind of have something like that with Jerusalem, which is
Hmm.
a sacred city for not only Christians and Jews, but for Muslims as well. And they all have their various sites, but I think there are some sites they visit together or feel are holy. They tend to clash a little more than the uh, different Buddhist sects do, though, or even the different Indian sects. India had a great tradition at that time of complete spiritual free thought. You could have any, if you wanted to, no matter how odd your spiritual philosophy was, that was your thing, man. You know, that's fine as long as you don't keep anyone else from following their spiritual insights,
Right.
which I think is a healthier way to do things personally. But so this mountain is in the Himalayas then.
Yeah, it's interesting too because they also say that this actually has something to do with Mount Muru.
Ah,
And
yeah, that makes sense.
so,
That would.
no, I from what I've taken, Mount Muru was a spiritual. Well, I don't know if it actually exists. They say that it was a spiritual representation for the Hindu cosmology. Um,
Yeah, they generally go with a spiritual explanation. A lot of this stuff has to do with ancient cosmology. So there might have been people at one time that believed, yeah, there's this giant mountain at the center of things. But this kind of gets back, though, there is kind of a spiritual and a psychological kind of idea of, and we've talked about it before, about the axis mundi, the axis of the world, the point which is still, everything else turns around it. It's often
mhm.
associated with the Polaris, the North Star, because that appears to stay fairly still. It does move a little bit. And everything else goes around it. Very exaggerated, very obvious motion. If you spent any time watching the stars and the planets, the sun and the moon. So you've got this whole idea of the central point of the universe. But then you get into this idea of, the old saying from the book of I think it was the book of the 29 philosophers or the 27 philosophers of God is an intelligible sphere whose
Mhm.
center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. So, in a sense, any place you go to and make a pilgrimage, any holy mountain becomes Mount Meru, becomes the Axis Mundi. So, no matter where the Buddha sat, that would be the tree. No matter where Christ was crucified, no matter what cross they used, that would be the tree. That would be the cross. That would be the Axis Mundi. No, so these things are like sometimes referred to a specific time and space, but then as the religion expands, and also to tell you the truth, when your science gets better and you notice that there's nobody living up on top of Mount Olympus, then you say, okay, it's a spiritual thing. There's a spiritual Mount Olympus. There is a mountain in a sense that's in the center of everything, down from which all power flows. It's the center around which everything else moves, but it's the still point from which you can observe everything. Time stops, space stops, you enter eternity. And when you enter eternity, no matter where you might be on a map, then you are at the axis mundi. So it makes sense to me that um, when they would make a pilgrimage to this mountain, they would associate it in a sense with Mount Meru, with that central peak. Um, and again, there is that whole, we're talking about moving from primitive ideas of cosmology into more refined spiritual ideas, and which I think are also, at the end of the day, are much more satisfying to the human soul. No, I don't have
Mhm.
to go to Tibet to find Mount Meru or go to Antarctica or wherever. I can find it right here in my backyard on this little pile of earth that I piled up. And that's why ziggurats, that's why pyramids, that's why these large, these were like central mountains. These were like the central, the Egyptians would call like the Great Pyramid of Khufu was like the horizon of Khufu, which is a really magnificent and moving term. I'm not even sure exactly what it means, but it sounds really cool. And to me, it kind of implies that he's at the center of the sky. He's the center of everything on his central mountain, and all around him is his horizon. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that they would associate that place with Mount Meru.
The thing that really catches my eye when it comes to all that is it's like um, they what was it? It's I was pulling it up here in a minute ago when you were talking about the Axis Monday. They consider that mountain as being like the navel of the cosmos, and
Mm.
that kind of takes me back to the way that the Japanese feel about Mount Fuji as well. You know, and then they consider Mount Kailash as Mount Muru in the Buddhist tradition, which I thought was interesting. And that actually, from what I found out, was the Buddhists believe that it's a symbolism of supreme bliss. It represents supreme bliss, and it has to do with Chakras Mavara
Hmm.
or Dimchak.
I'm not good at
Dim,
pronouncing Pali. I'm worse with Sanskrit.
yeah, it's interesting. Whenever I seen that, I was like, that's strange because that's that's a really old Indo-European belief too. You know.
Well, Buddhism is an old Indo-European teaching in a lot of ways. The Buddha was himself Indo-European.
Yeah.
Our earliest traditions of him have he has blue eyes, and he came from an area of the world that had Indo-European. I mean, India, that's the home of the original Aryans, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like so. Yeah, no, these ideas run deep in our subconscious, and they inform not just our thought but our language, the way we put things, the way we arrange the way we arrange our mental frameworks, the way that we arrange our mental fabrications or verbal fabrications. So, and also when you are talking to people, you have to talk to them in their language, and that includes, language is culture. And if you came from another planet and all you knew of English was the dictionary, um, you could communicate, but you would miss a lot because you simply wouldn't have the nonverbal culture behind the meanings of a lot of the words. The way we can talk to each other in English and say things with a slightly different tone, or a reference to something that and slang, of course, uh, would be completely beyond, a theoretical man from Mars with a dictionary. And that's one of the issues with AI too, and we've talked about before. The LLMs, or AIs as they're called, are capable of processing a vast amount of written information, verbal information, even sounds, but they will always lack the experience of living. I sound like Captain Kirk again. They, you know, or Dr. McCoy. Damn it, Jim! They can't think. They're machines. They have no soul. Uh,
Star Trek,
so,
the next generation. No,
uh,
no,
I'll tell
no.
you, I like the original series.
So do
Next
I.
Generation had some good bits. They were okay. They,
It took a while to get used to Picard. You know
yeah,
that's really what it was, in my opinion.
well, the first season was interesting because the acting was awful, but the
Mm,
writing was actually interesting because Roddenberry was still alive, and a lot of his stories were actually driven by what I would consider to be really excellent and thoughtful science fiction. And, trying to wrestle with certain ideas of how a technology is going to affect things. One of the things I liked about him was he was trying to create in Star Trek, one of the ideas was that it was a moneyless society. Now, how does a moneyless society work? Well, that's a challenge to present to a viewer on TV. But so you've got to have very interesting and intricate and thoughtful scripts. A lot of our writing has to do with the conflict between wanting something and getting it, and you've got to earn enough money, the scarcity of resources, and so forth and so on. So I think what happened in Star Trek, Roddenberry died, unfortunately, and they suddenly introduced money, gold press latinum, because it was too difficult to come up with stories without that driving force of money in the society and culture. Because if you think about it, you'd have to rewrite so much about how the culture actually functioned, how a culture would function without money. You would still need things of value, right? There would still be things that were rare, but there'd have to be a whole new way of exchange. So, interesting thought. And I don't know how you would do it. So I'm not going to try right now. But no, Star Trek was an excellent series.
I think he caught on to his mistake there too, because it's like or somebody did, because the Ferengi, when they came out with the Ferengi, that's when they started introducing.
Yeah, the greed motif. That
Mm-hmm.
early, I think they were in the first season too.
Mm,
Um, and they were like, because they needed new bad guys.
yeah,
They made the Klingons good guys. That was one of the problems with the Next Generation was they had this whole tendency to have to understand the bad guys, and by the end of a few seasons, the bad guys were actually pretty good. And it wasn't that they were really evil. The Klingons weren't really evil. We just didn't understand their culture, and that's
yeah,
great. But you still need villains, so they had to come up with Ferengi and Cardassians. The Cardassians were, or excuse me, the Ferengi were really mean and evil and caricatures of certain ethnic groups, in my opinion. And they were very. And then by the time you got to Deep Space Nine, it's the Ferengi show with Worf. It's like it's just let's have another show with Ferengis, and they were like everybody's darlings, and everybody wanted to be Ferengis, and again we were shown they weren't really bad. So then they needed Cardassians because you always need a bad guy, but then they were going to rehabilitate the Cardassians. And it's at least with the original series, the Klingons were like these nice cutout bad guys, and they weren't really quite that bad, um, but they were very Nietzschean. The weak
mm-hmm.
shall perish. I remember Commander Core there. It's like it is our way, Kirk. It is our way. War will sort things out. The strong will conquer. It'll be glorious. And it's like they were not evil so much as psychopathic. So you had to have a war with the Klingons. And the great advantage of that is that it means that the Federation is entirely justified in taking this stance against them. None of that moral ambiguity you got with the Next Generation, and then worse yet with Deep Space Nine. And I won't even talk about Star Trek Voyager. That was so awful.
Yeah. Well, I
This,
mean, I think a lot of people have a hard time with accepting the fact that Gene Roddenberry was liberal. You know what I mean?
oh
Actually,
yeah,
he was
but he was a liberal
borderline.
of the 1960s, which means he'd be called a Nazi today. I mean, if you look at my social and political thought, I would fit in quite well with a classical liberal from the 1950s or 60s, probably. But just like, the definition of liberal has changed so much. It's just insane. I mean, they were crucifying Hugh Hefner. I mean, this was a guy that was like, a complete JFK liberal. I mean, the poster boy for the left at one time. And I don't know. It's really weird. But Roddenberry had a lot of ideas which at the time were seen as very liberal. which today I think would be seen as normal or even right wing. I mean, a lot. I know when he did the original pilot, supposedly he wanted to have Majel Barrett, his wife, play the captain, um, or at least she was. No, I remember she was the first officer in the original pilot. That was it, and no women starship commanders, um, which is its own thing. That's a whole different thing to talk about. But and they had Mr. Spock, and he said, I don't know if this is true or not. The network said that's too weird. You can either have an alien or a woman commanding officer. You can't have both. And he went with the alien for whatever reason. I don't personally know what the actual story was. There were a lot of stories told about it later, but on the one hand, he showed women serving as officers, but he did put them in those cool mini dresses.
Yeah. Well,
But
that
I think
was
that's a space requirement. You just have to in outer space. Girls have to wear mini dresses. It's something to do with the radiation or something.
yeah, and you got to remember it was the '70s, man.
60s. It was
Or
the 60s, dude.
'60s even
Yeah,
better.
for the
Like
60s. Yeah, yeah,
you remember UFO, don't you?
yeah. That same thing. Girls in space have to wear these weird clingy outfits. It's some kind of space medicine thing, I guess. I've seen it in every series, so it must
Mm-hmm.
be. Uh,
And
you know,
purple
all
hair.
the, yes, yes. You need those purple hair wigs. That was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked how they could change it. They had like what was it, silver lame, like aluminum foil mini skirts for off duty, which I thought was pretty cool. It's like, let me just change it on a little aluminum foil. Maybe put a little more foil on. Yeah,
like
there has to be some kind of weird science behind that. It's in all the shows. uh,
I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it with a lot of it. I think what happened was is like they they tried to get cartoonish with a lot of it. You know what I mean? And then I think like even today people just take a lot of that too serious. You know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like whenever I watch that stuff, it just reminds me of when I was a kid and I had an imagination. You know what I mean? Like look at today how they've literally just gotten rid of cartoons. What's wrong with a kid watching a cartoon?
I don't know. Today, I think I was talking about this to someone else, or maybe it was you. No, I'm not sure, but we were talking about cartoons, and it's like, I mean, I used to watch cartoons as a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
I always noticed that the newer cartoons were worse than the older ones. And it was very strange for me because, when you're a kid growing up, I was told everything's getting better and better, right? We
Mm-hmm.
don't live in the Stone Age anymore. And as time goes on, we're getting better and life gets better and everything, the myth of progress. But I would watch cartoons, and I would watch a cartoon from like the 1930s, and it was drawn beautifully. You know what I mean, man? Like the
Mm-hmm.
Disney cartoons, or even just like the regular Merry Melodies, the Looney Tunes. And then after the war, especially in the 50s and 60s, they were drawn worse until the cartoons that were drawn in like the 1960s when I was watching them. I mean, they were reusing old footage. It was obviously the backgrounds were not very well done. And I was like, I could tell then as a child, the further back you go, the better it was. And that it's not true that everything is getting better because these cartoons are getting worse and worse. And of course a lot of it had to do with the bottom line. They discovered that you could only, if you animated X number of frames per second, that was the minimum number you could do and still retain an illusion of motion. So they cut back on that. They outsourced. They used overseas, foreign cheaper labor, and with cheaper quality. And it just got worse and worse. Now, of course, the technology is caught up. But what gets me about what I've seen of like cartoon shows today, they're not really cartoon shows. They're like franchises,
Yeah.
merchandising things. The whole thing is an integrated package of like games and toys and food and Happy Meals and these shows, which are basically encouraging the kids to buy all this stuff. They're just like, it's like a commercial. And I mean, at least the original cartoons were designed to entertain people in movie houses. You would get a cartoon and like a short subject, maybe a newsreel, and a feature presentation or whatever. And there was no thought of, well, we're going to create this character named Bugs Bunny, and we're going to sell Bugs Bunny hats and Bugs Bunny vitamin pills, and Bugs Bunny vodka and whatever. Um, it, it was a thing in itself. You just wanted to make something funny and something amusing, something to watch. So I was just today I was driving along and I saw in a car window some kind of a sticker for some kid's cartoon. I was like, I have no idea what that cartoon is, but I'll bet $1 that it's some kind of a merchandising thing at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Yep. I think what really lost or made it go the wrong direction was back in the 70s between I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched. Like everybody today, they talk really big about I Dream or Bewitched, but they don't realize the difference between Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. Like on Bewitched, it was supposed to be a kid show where the guy was an advertiser and he was always drinking.
Oh yeah, martinis. They were always
Yeah,
always, and cigarettes, of course.
and pushing the alcohol and tobacco on a kid show. Whereas you watch I Dream of Jeannie and it was all fun. It was the Laugh Factory that was actually doing that. And
Well, a lot of it too was this was just seen as normal behavior. I mean, it was sort of expected. I remember going into the bank and there'd be ashtrays right at the bank counter. Ashtrays everywhere you went. Cigarettes were everywhere, and people were boozing constantly. I remember watching those was it William Powell, the Thin Man movies,
mm-hmm.
detective movies, and it's like I'm starting to notice that this guy's just drinking all the time. Have a couple of drinks. Well, let's drive over here. What? It's like he's just driving around the car with a mini bar in the car. I'm like, oh no, please. Um, but yeah, it was just people didn't even blink. Of course, people didn't wear seatbelts then. A lot of things people didn't do. Kids didn't wear helmets on bicycles, which I still find very odd. Well, they're probably a good idea. I don't know.
Well, I mean, for me, whenever I looked at it, it just dawned on me that was going on whenever I was a kid. I was watching. I never even paid attention.
Yeah, I watched that show all the time when I was a kid. I loved to watch Bewitched. I watched I Dream of Jeannie, My Three Sons. What else did I watch?
My Three Sons. I haven't seen that one in a while. I might go and check it out. It's been a while.
Hugh Beaumont. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave it to Beaver. Hugh Beaumont. That was it. And
Okay.
Leave it to Beaver. Ta-dun, 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 ta-dun. Hello, Mr. Cleaver. Hello, Mrs. Cleaver.
Yeah.
Wally. That was the guy.
Mm-hmm.
I used to know a guy like that. He said, I'm Wally from Leave It to Beaver. Was his thing. He was probably not alive anymore. He used to do lighting for rock and roll bands, and he used to do lighting for this band out in Western New York. What was their name? The Shintas. And he was also like this big time pot dealer. And I go over to his house. He's got like pounds of weed around it, and I'm like, dude, you do like lights for these? They do these. This band did all this. Remember Dare? Drug
Mm-hmm.
is drug whatever resistance education, drug avoidance resist. Yeah, they would do these Dare concerts and just say no and stuff like this. Is way back then. And I said, dude, but you do you work with the. He goes, I'm just like Wally Cleaver. I just go up to all these straight guys. And I'm like, hello, Mr. Cleaver. Hello, Mrs. Cleaver. How are you today? I'm just going to help Theodore with this and that's that. And the minute they're gone, it's like, roll one up.
Yeah.
But he would just like, channel Wally. Gee, Wally. Those shows did have an influence, though.
Now, with Leave It to Beaver, I always love watching him get his head stuck in stuff. Like he had the one where he got his head stuck in the rails for the stairs.
Oh yeah.
And then the firefighters had to come out to in the middle of town somewhere. He got his head stuck in the poles for something. And they had to
I vaguely remember. Yeah, he must have loved shooting those scenes. All right, kid, you're putting your head between two bars.
Everywhere he went, he got his head stuck between the poles and stuff. And it's like that's the best episode I remember when it comes to Leave It to Beaver. Like And Eddie Haskell is the guy
That
that
was it. Eddie Haskell. That was the one. I was calling him Wally. Yeah, Eddie
yeah,
Haskell. That's yeah. It's been so many years, man. I'm
Eddie
old.
Haskell.
That was the one. Hello, Mr. Cleaver. Hello. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was it. He was the snake in the grass.
Well, nobody caught on to it back then. That's the thing I don't I mean, back during those days, how did Hollywood allow that to slip through their fingers? You know what I mean? Because
No.
they were so big at trying to be all patriotic and show the family life the way they wanted you to see it. But at the same time, they just let Eddie Haskell slide right in there. You know what I mean?
Well, they were tropes, and they were entertainers too. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and people like characters like that. That's why Dr. Smith was so big in Lost in Space, and he was basically a villain, but he became like a comic villain and really the star of the show by the end of the run. I think the other actors were not happy with that, from what I've heard. They
Well,
they signed up to do a serious space drama. It was
mm-hmm.
supposed to be like really serious. The first season was too, if you remember Lost in Space. Um, by the end of it, they had people dressed up like carrots prancing around on the stage.
Well, I
When I,
know.
I was a kid, I enjoyed it, but I can see where it would be very frustrating for the actors.
I've talked it over with my brother on that too, and you can see that in all the shows, even from back then to today. Like if you have a show you really like, you can always tell when it's coming to its end whenever they start doing like dramas to the side that have absolutely nothing to do with the show. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like when you remember Xena, right? Warrior Princess.
I do remember that. Yeah,
They had her on there, and then all of a sudden she goes from being a warrior princess to singing opera and stuff on her TV shows. You know what I mean? Or all of a sudden there's reporters that show up in the middle of like during ancient times asking questions and stuff, and it's like that's when you know a show's getting ready to
yeah,
go under when they start doing stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're reaching. They're
Hmm.
reaching. Oh man.
I've even seen that with my sister likes The Walking Dead, and it started getting really melodramatic. Like they would take something that would basically be maybe a 2 minute scene, and they would just stretch it out to where it would be memorable and cinematic.
Ah,
The
yeah, you got to be
leaves,
careful.
yeah, the leaves are just rising into the air, and the dew is, and it's all slow motion with beautiful music. You was like, yep, they're getting ready to end their seasons.
That also means that they don't have to write as many lines for the script.
Exactly.
You're paying the actors less. Let's put an
Mm.
extra 10 minutes of shots in there. Yeah, that's less to write. More
Yeah.
stock footage. Yeah, yeah. Uh, well, it's interesting. There were some. It's always odd when they start getting fancy with the cinematography like that. But I've also seen shows where they didn't have a lot of budget, but they had really good cameramen, really good direction, and they could kind of make up for that. And there was a wonderful show. It was a Sherlock Holmes show with Ronald Howard, not Ron Howard, but Ronald Howard, and a guy by the name of H. Marion Crawford, who used to play like British colonels a lot. And they played Holmes and Watson. And for me, the best thing Ronald Howard played Holmes, and for me, the best thing about his performance was he was not trying to be Basil Rathbone. Because when Basil Rathbone had been Holmes, he set the standard. He was Holmes for the longest time, and every other actor was measured up to that. But Ronald Howard, knowing that every actor has to give their own interpretation, he created his own Holmes. And it was a slightly comic series. It was really good. They didn't last for too long. And they didn't have a lot of money. But what they did have was people that really, really liked Sherlock Holmes. The writers were all really good at Holmes stuff. The sets were the best sets I've seen for Sherlock Holmes. They got every detail right that's mentioned in the stories, and great cinematography. They spent a lot of time on close-ups, reaction shots, a lot more than they would have to do. They had really good cameramen, really good cinematographers, and I think it's probably my favorite Sherlock Holmes television series, and I would advise anyone to check it out. But we've gotten far afield from Buddhism, haven't we, Roger?
Well, you have.
Well, I'm going to get right back to it before we get too far afield.
I
Um,
really enjoy scrolling through a lot of this stuff when we do it.
it is
Like,
cool. It is cool. I was thinking though about something that happened to me today,
hmm
and having to do with time and timing. We were talking about time earlier, and
hmm
that poor turtle. And for him, he was going at top speed, you know, and yet it was very slow for us. Because I'm convinced that a Galapagos tortoise that lives to be 300 years old, and a mayfly that lives for 24 hours, um, both have different senses of time. They both probably feel like they've lived about 70 years, in my opinion.
hmm
So what you've got, and all the creatures, I mean, we've talked about the time before. Time is not clocks. Clocks are useful. They're measurements of time. They tick at a certain rate, but time is actually an experience that we have. It's a very subjective and individual experience. It's a sensation. It's something that we encounter and live through. And we all know from our experience that sometimes time moves more quickly, more slowly. If you've ever been in a near-death experience, like in a bad accident, or been under a great deal of sudden physical or mental stress, you will sometimes notice that time gets very, very slow.
hmm
And things that take just a few seconds seem to take minutes or hours. And so when I came across, I had a rather difficult night last night. Not one of my best nights, we all have them. And I got up this morning and I was not having a good day. And I had to do some running around, and it was raining very badly here today. And I was going up to visit my mom in the nursing home because mom's phone wasn't working. They have some kind of technical difficulty up there, and the phones haven't worked in 2 days. So I knew she would be missing me, so I decided since I can't call her, I'd better go up and see her. So I'm going to go there, and there's a lot of traffic, and there's a closed road I wasn't expecting, but I know the back roads by this time I'm out in the country, and I'm taking all these weird turns. The rain is slowing me down, and then it all happens at such a perfect point that I was driving along, and I see the turtle in the middle of the road. And he was right in the middle. It was it was very difficult to see anything because of the rain. I could just make out this dark thing until I got almost right on top of him, and I swerved it around. But I realized later that if all these things hadn't happened, every delay, every other, thing, unpleasantness or whatever that might have happened, I wouldn't have been able to help that guy across the road and quite possibly have saved his life. Because even if people, and I mean, there are really terrible people out there that will go out of their way to run down a helpless animal like that. And even if they don't want to, it was very hard to see the guy. I could really, and people were whipping along in the rain. I could see someone. So, and I remember when I got him across the way, and I ran down to grab him in the pounding rain, got him across, ran back to my car, and I pulled up a little ways and pulled over into a parking lot somewhere so I could just wait for the rain to pass. And I felt really good because I had saved another creature's life or done my best to do it. It's a very meritorious act from a Buddhist standpoint.
Yeah.
We're here to help each other. And it just completely, I just felt so good at doing good. And that's part of the secret of Buddhist creating merit, they call it sometimes, doing a meritorious act. When we do good, the good doesn't leave us. We have more good than we had before. It really is something that when we share our goodwill, when we share our help, we really are helping ourselves. And that is ultimately the Theravada analysis of this stuff. And people say it's really selfish. You're only thinking of yourself. You should be sacrificing yourself for everything else. Like, no, 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 no. You can't really do anything for anyone else. But when you're doing something for yourself, very often that is in the form of doing things for other people. When I'm feeling like, when I've got my mind in the position of I'm trying to practice ahimsa, being as harmless as possible, and I have an opportunity like this, and my instinct is like, bam, I just pull right over. I didn't even have to think about it, and I'm just doing this good thing. Yes, I'm really glad that I helped the tortoise, and I'm really, really happy about that. But I'm also happy that I'm happy. And there's nothing wrong with being happy that we're happy because we help someone else be happy. So that's Buddhism for you, if you like, at least my version of it. I'm sure there are people that might disagree with with me in theological detail, but that's my nuts and bolts everyday practice. So,
I
and
like it.
it's really good to do that today. I feel really good about that. I'm glad I could share it with everybody here.
I
All
really,
three of our viewers.
I like the whole thing about the turtle. I forgot who it was. I think it might have been you or somebody else who mentioned that turtles are actually has something to do with the spiritual world too. It's a representation of some kind. I think it might have been Mark who mentioned it.
Hmm. I know the turtle has been used in a lot of different mythologies and folklore and stuff. You're probably familiar, and if nothing else, Terry Pratchett has popularized it. But there's an old cosmological theory that the Earth is a flat disk
Hmm.
resting on the back of four elephants,
Yeah.
which rest on the back of a turtle. And there was an interesting story of the little old lady who subscribed to this, going to a lecture of an astronomer, and she says, "Don't you understand that the Earth is like on the back of four elephants, and they're standing on the back of an enormous turtle?" So the astronomer says, "Well, what does that turtle stands on?" And the little old lady said, without missing a beat, "Why, another turtle." And he said, "Well, what does that turtle stand on?" She says, "Another turtle." And he said, "Well, what does that turtle stand on?" And she said, "It's no good, young man. You're not going to get anywhere that way, for it's turtles all the way down."
That's
And that's
interesting.
a song, too. Someone made that into a song. Turtle Simpson. It's a very good song, too. Uh,
I remember when you were talking about time and how we perceive it. That's actually one of the reasons why I got interested in the whole thing with Mount Meru and Mount Kalash in the first
uh-huh.
place. Meru or Meru, however you say it. But
I can't pronounce it.
back whenever I first heard about Mount Kalash, uh, there were pilgrims that would do that trek, and if
Right.
you in that track, I mean, it's not something you do in like one day and you're done with it.
Right.
Like whenever they go around that thing, it takes, I think it's like 3 weeks or so to go
Ooh.
all the way around it, and it's a physical challenge. It's for one thing, it's one of the highest. It has one of the highest elevations in the world because it's in Tibet. And then they have to go around it. And these people, man, they go through these experiences, like they have spiritual experiences and stuff like that. But they also start talking about phenomena that happens to them, and I think it could be because of the lack of air or because of the amount of stress that their body goes through. But they start talking about how that the nails would literally grow for in just like 7 days. It would grow at the rate of like 3 weeks, and it,
Huh.
it and stuff like that would happen.
Hmm.
Um, and that's something that really caught my attention, and that they would always talk about like time didn't seem to match up. You know what I mean? And there was always
Yeah.
time in growth, basically, is what it was always about.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think there are time slips sometimes. I know, I mean, they've got big mountains, in Tibet, and nothing is easy there as far as travel and things. So,
mhm.
yeah, you're going to be under very harsh conditions. You're going to be in very physically demanding situations, which is going to take its toll on your body. But this is also, we know that mystics all through history have sought these physical extremes
Yeah.
as a way of spiritual enlightenment. I mean, these guys are trekking for days and days into the mountains and finding the mountain, climbing and this and that, and the freezing cold and the Sasquatches, or they have Yeti there, and bandits and all this other stuff. Or you've got yogis who are sitting, just emaciated, starving themselves, subjecting themselves to heat, to cold, all these extremes, basically punishing the body, if you like, to free the mind. At least that's the thought. And we know that these physical extremes can lead to visions, altered states of consciousness. When people are shipwrecked, they say that people who are like all alone in a lifeboat or something, they can start having really intense audiovisual hallucinations very quickly. And I remember one case of somebody who was his ship went down on the Great Lakes, which are really large inland seas, and he was drifting for days, horrible cold weather, and they did rescue him, and he lived, and he talked about the visions he had. He was adrift on this thing, and he was really thirsty, and he was going to eat some of the snow. And suddenly he said this robed figure appeared, an older bearded man in a white robe appeared and told him, "Don't eat that. It will lower your body temperature and you will die. Don't eat the snow." So he didn't. And I don't know. Was that Julian James's bicameral mind suddenly coming at a moment of stress? Was it a spiritual force that was coming to help him because he had the good karma or kama to have that kind of intercession? Was it just a hallucination? Was it, who knows? Was it a smarter part of his brain that had to contact his brain to tell him not to eat the snow? I mean, that would be Julian James's idea ultimately. So, but this comes from these extreme physical endurances. I mean, that's what a lot of these initiation ceremonies, we've talked before about initiation. And an initiation, a proper initiation, should be a consciousness altering experience. The idea is that we interrupt our imprinting, our psychological imprinting, when we're in moments of stress. And so now I am not a Freemason, so I am not obligated to keep the secrets of their fraternity. And these secrets are something that are hidden sedulously. You need a library card and about 15 minutes in a reference library to discover them. I mean, it's all been written. It's all, So we know from their Master Mason ritual, there is a symbolic death and resurrection. So in the old days, people would be scared shitless. We're going to kill you. You went through a death. You were thrown down a well at one point. I mean, nowadays it's all very nice and genteel and stuff. But the idea was you scared the hell out of the person you were initiating. Some of these primitive initiations, like the ones that like the Australian Aborigines do for their males, are fierce and terrible. And they have at one point in the initiation, I think the men use these bull roarers to make these weird sound effects that are only used during this time. So the kids never heard this before. They have no fucking idea what this is. And they're told, you got to hide in these bushes. If you look up, you will die. And this is a kind of a training in obedience. And I think it was as recently as the 1950s. It might have been the year 54 comes to mind. I could be wrong, though. But anyway, it was relatively recent. Some kid looked up. They killed him. They ate him. Because initiation ceremonies used to be tough. And it was like, and the other kids learned, where's little Timmy? Oh, he looked up. He wasn't supposed to. They're not kidding around when they say, if you look up, you'll be killed. It's not you'll look up, you'll be killed. They look up and they say, naughty boy. What are the other kids going to learn? They're not going to obey. So these kids, they obeyed when they got back to the tribe. It's very harsh. It's and again, I describe these things. It does not mean I advocate for them or even like them. I don't. But it is effective. It's very effective and time tested. And I think we can get a glimpse into what Stone Age peoples did by looking at the few modern day Stone Age peoples that we have left. This can give us an idea of what their spiritual life must have been like. And man, it was pretty robust and harsh, very harsh.
I don't know. The thing that really catches my attention when it comes to a lot of it is I'd really love to get into the mythology. You know what I mean? And the if you really look at the mythology, it's better than most sci-fi movies that are out. Like
Oh yeah,
everybody loves to go watch Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? You know,
right.
I mean piranhas. If you read the piranhas, dude, it'll blow your mind. Lord of the Rings have nothing on the Hindus. That's all I gotta
Oh
say, man.
yeah.
You know.
Well, they've got this one huge book, the Mahabharata. It's enormous, and it's all about these wars and these families fighting, and it just blows the Iliad and the Odyssey out of the water for length. It's
Hmm.
humongous. I don't even know if it's ever the entire thing's ever been translated into English. It would take months and months and months to read the thing. It's like War and Peace on steroids, as far as the book goes, and makes you think about all the stuff we've lost because all these stories, they were once just verbal stories. People just told them, and then we invented writing and we started writing them down, and we're very fortunate in a place like India where it was preserved. But man, I'm still pissed off about them burning the Library of Alexandria. Who
Yeah.
knows what we would have found there? That would have been
Exa-
so cool.
Yep. I what was it? It was the Persian city too, where Alexander the Great was
Oh
supposed.
yeah, Persepolis, yeah,
Yeah, that
burnt it
one.
all.
Burn it all down. They don't know for sure if he did it or if it was done on accident, but I mean, just from what
Well,
I've heard historically, it was probably on purpose.
one thing I heard about that was that like a lot of these places, it was an administrative city. It
Hmm.
was the capital of it was the government center. So it didn't really have any other reason to exist except that there was a bunch of government guys there. There was no grain, there was no like industry, there was no trade. It wasn't near a major trade route. So when the city was destroyed, it never really came back because there was no reason. There were a lot of other really good cities. The capital moved, and it was just kind of left. And they said as a result, they had a lot more stuff to dig up there. Archaeologists, because a lot of these places, they just keep living on top of them. It's like going to Rome today. You go into to put in a patio, and oh my God, here's like an ancient, an ancient villa under here. It's just built on so many levels, and you just can't get to it because people are living on top of it, and
Yep.
they're always building and they're laying down foundations and they're stealing the old stone. I mean, that's why the pyramids don't have casing stones because the locals came and took them all off for building, right? But not Persepolis because it was destroyed, deserted, and because it was a government place, they never really bothered rebuilding. So in that sense, it worked out. Although losing the library was, I hate that. I hate when that happened.
No, with me, everything leads back to Hollow Earth. You know what I mean? It's like that's my whole fascination with it is because like I don't have to believe it. I just know that it's cool. You know what I mean? It is just this. It's like you've realized how many people in the last 300 years have died trying to make it to these mountains in Tibet so that they could find the secret entrance to freaking Shambhala. You know?
They just need to get onto clandestine international airlines flight 17. We fly there every week. They just they don't know the way.
Exactly, man.
But the Theosophists were fascinated with this, and one of their things was that they were being directed by secret chiefs, secret masters living in the Himalayas, and they would communicate with Madame Blavatsky and the other leaders of the group with telepathy, and they would send them letters. They called them apports, like as in teleport. They were just apport letters, so letters would fall from the ceiling and things like that. And I remember one of these guys was a theosophist, and a lot of these guys were a little mentally unstable. And he had to meet the masters. He wanted to meet the masters, so finally he went to try to find them. He actually hiked up into the mountains to try to find them, and he disappeared.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, "What happened to this guy?" And one of the leaders of the Theosophists says, "Oh, we got a message from the secret chiefs. He arrived and he's happy and safe in their like little place or whatever. Well, they found his frozen dead body by the side of the road later. So if he got there, it was a spiritual transformation, not a physical one. So, so yeah, no. If you want to go to Shambhala, book a flight on clandestine international airlines. We live every Tuesday on the wonderful world of weirdness, and this is your best bet for Shambhala.
Yes, this is we go to Shambhala every week.
We do.
It's amazing that nobody catches on to that. You know what I mean? You know.
Mm, they will. And of course, some people can transship over to get on the plane for Agartha. We don't go there ourselves, but
Now, for me, the thing that I get into when I do research on that is the Vedas, and you were
yeah.
talking about how much has been lost. Okay, now that
Mm.
is a good subject when it comes to lost text, because I don't think they have been able to interpret all of the Vedas, have they?
Well, I'm not an expert on the Vedas, but I know that remember reading that some of the references in them seem to be very, very old and are talking about, astronomical positions dating back many thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, these guys were smart enough astronomers that they could figure out what things were 12,000 years ago and insert them in. You want things to be accurate. But even so, it shows a very good knowledge of astronomy, for one thing, to know about this stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it also shows that these are very, very, very old texts. But the thing about a lot of these Vedas is, as I understand it, again, I'm no expert, so with that caveat, they would have they were composed of what they call sutras in
Yeah.
Sanskrit, or in Pali in Buddhism we say suttas, and a sutta in Buddhism is like a work of the Buddha, story of the Buddha or something like that. But sutta originally, or sutra originally, with the Hindus meant a thread. So we get the word suture from the same word. And the idea was that the sutra would give you the thread of the knowledge, but not all of the knowledge. You needed a teacher who had learned from his teacher, who was initiated, and who had the hands-on, on-the-job training of meditation and spiritual work and stuff. And the sutra, I keep wanting to say sutta because it's Pali, but we're talking India, so it's Sanskrit. Sutra. The sutras were like threads, but they weren't the whole story. So you can't really understand them completely without an initiated teacher that could explain them, kind of deal. So it's sort of like having a bunch of Cliff's Notes, which will give you the gist of something, but unless you've got an English teacher who can explain everything, and better yet, have a copy of the whole novel, that you're not really going to have the full knowledge. So on that level, I'm sure that they don't understand a lot of them. I guess a lot of them have to do with just straight rituals too. They had this idea that um, communing with the gods and getting like spiritual results had to do with sacrifice. It all had to do with sacrifice and the ceremonies around it. And they would say that, the Brahmins, the priests would say, if we do the sacrifice exactly right, you will get your result, or we can compel the gods with our stuff. And the ancient Egyptian priests said the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, it doesn't always work. So then you go to the priest and say, hey, how come it didn't work? It's like, well, we must have made a mistake. Maybe somebody sneezed at the wrong time. Somebody missed a syllable. There was just something wrong. We'll just have to do it again. And which is fine for the priest because they were paid a fee for every time it was done. And I imagine you either did it until you ran out of money or until you got your result, whichever came first. So that was something that it was a very external focus on things. I think that was part of what not just Buddhism but other spiritual paths were kind of working away from. I mean, if your idea of a spiritual path is just going through the motions and saying the right words, fine, and that can be a path. But for people that want to look inward, control their own mind, and try to gain what power they can, in Buddhism especially, power is found by turning within, because all that you really have control over is your own mind. But if you can gain power over that, That is better than gaining power over 10,000 enemies. Because and this kind of goes along with the Stoics too. The Stoics had this idea as like a man that can control his own mind is superior to any circumstances that he finds himself in. He will live well and he will die well. And something Seneca said, I think it was, that just because your circumstances in life have been such that you could not live well, there is no reason you cannot die well. Everyone must educate themselves. Everyone must, bring their minds to center. Everyone can do this, no matter where you're coming from. We can all die well because we're all going to die anyway. So let's try to do it well.
Mhm.
I want to go out well.
I think that's what we all want to do, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's just when you look at it, like I've had a lot of time with my parents who just recently passed away, and I can honestly tell you that when I look at the hardships they've gone through, it just makes me want to try to better myself, not so that I don't go through those same hardships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it,
Yeah.
it, it really is it really is something that I think a lot of people need to do is they need to be able to spend time with their parents during their final days. That way they can kind of get a grasp of like this is going to happen to you. It's not something that might happen. These are the things you're going to have to contend with. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You know, once I think that's probably one of the best parts of being around my parents during their last part of their life was the fact that I was able to see it. You know,
Yeah. Well,
so.
for most of human history, we have been with our parents. Families have lived together. It's a very recent idea that everybody should go off and start their own life and just leave home. Generations would live in the same home. And one of the reasons you had children, especially in the very old days before they had any kind of social safety nets, children would care for you even as you cared for them, and their children would do the same. So every generation went through this, and most people are so boxed off from any experience of death. We're very in our culture. We hide it away. I mean, we have it in all our movies. We have all this theatrical death of people shooting each other and blowing each other up and this and that. Die Hard and Kill Bill, to the point where it gets ridiculous. But actual death, we hide it away. We pull a sheet right over it. We get the coroner in there. We get the funeral home. We get the makeup on, and we don't know about the living aspect of death, the staying with someone in their decline. I was visiting my mom today, um, and she's almost 100 years old. She can still have a kind of a conversation, but her mind isn't really there. We talked for a while, and I played her one of our radio shows. She was very interested to hear about that, and she couldn't really hear it very well. I'm going to bring her some headphones next time, but she was delighted with the AI imagery that I was showing her. She thought it was just wonderful. But seeing her like that, and all those other people there, I stop and I talk with them, and it wakes me up to. In Buddhism, they talk about something called samvega or samvega, and what that means is this sense of urgency, like as they are now, so shall I be.
Yeah.
So I, like you're saying, you've got to prepare. You've got to be ready. And the other part of it is we don't know when really. We have hopes that it'll be a gradual process, but it can be sudden too. There's one guy used to say, when you're driving down the superhighway, sudden death is no further away than the other driver's last mixed drink, right?
Mm.
And or one little clot that you're not even aware of just hits the right place, and um, my I my blessed my one sister-in-law died a few years ago, and they said she was dead before she hit the ground. She was out flea marketing or something, or garage sailing. She loved going garage sailing. She was looking at stuff. She kind of went, fell down, gone. No warning, no warning. So when you think about things like that, it does give us this sense, but it's also a sense that more people had. You know,
Yeah.
A wisdom that we get simply from living and caring for our parents, and our parents caring for us. And yeah, we also realize the things they went through. As we get older, we see the difficulty of our life. We realize our parents had difficult lives too. And then when they get older, we share their difficulties with them, even as they shared ours. So,
Yep.
not easy though.
I I do have to say though it's really a good thing. It kind of gives you a different perspective because like whenever I was at my dad's funeral and everybody was there, I just kept telling them, I'm like, look, man, this is all for you more than it is for me or for even mom and dad, you know, because they didn't
Yeah.
understand that. Like, first of all, my dad, my dad didn't want to be buried. You know, he wanted to be cremated. First,
Oh,
you know, but my sisters wanted the burial, and
right.
you know, and so they did the burial and stuff. And I told my sister Amy, I was like, look, you know, I spent the last 10, 15 years with them. I was there. I mean, it was like my time with them is over. You know what I mean? It's like I was able to be with them. You know what I mean? And then when it comes to those guys, they weren't able to be there with them like I was. So
Yeah.
this was their time to mourn and do the funeral and do what they needed to do. And it was hard for them to understand that, but I mean,
Yeah. In that sense, it was harder on them than you
yeah,
because you had that time with him to say goodbye.
right. So it's really weird how all that works out, you know, because like if you're not around them during their final days, then like the grief is gonna hit you. It'll hit you
Yeah.
pretty bad if you aren't able to go through those rituals like the burial and the funeral and saying all
Yeah.
the beautiful things that you want to say. And
Closure. Yeah. Yeah. And like you're saying, it's for them too, not just them personally, but to comfort each other,
mm-hmm,
share the memories, and because as we get older, we go to more and more funerals, and there's it's nice when people are sharing good memories of someone,
yeah,
but it's definitely closure for the living, definitely closure for the living. Yeah.
because like for me, the weird part for me about my dad here recently was going through his paperwork, and I mentioned that before in the last
Hmm.
episode. You know,
Yes. Yeah, we were talking about that.
you
Yeah.
know, it was like that was no. My dad would have definitely had a. He would have thrown something at me if I if he caught me rummaging through his bills, man. That's the
You better
best
not
thing.
touch that wallet, boy.
Yeah.
That's Dad's wallet.
And
Oh
his
yeah,
wallet.
my dad. You weren't allowed to go in his
Yeah.
wallet.
He kept talking about having back problems, and then finally he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, it's your wallet. Take it out of your freaking pocket."
uh,
He's sitting on his wallet, and it was making his back sit at an angle. Doctor said, "Well, take that
it'll do
wallet.
it.
That's your problem right there." So,
Uh, my goodness. Yeah.
so
Well, Roger, I think I'm getting a signal from Shambhala International Airport. I think we're going to get ready to make our final approach soon. So, but I think we've had a very good flight so far.
yeah,
And you have manfully held off with your electronics warfare countermeasures all the attempts to bring us down as we flew over the various and sundry peaks. Um, in fact, our passengers weren't even aware of it. But Roger is there all the time, working the boards, and really is the best producer on the internet right now, or one of the best, I got to say. I won't say the best because we don't want your head to get too big. And
that's
besides,
true.
Bob will get mad at me.
Yep.
But he's magnificent, of course. We all know that. So, but before we go tonight, Raj, I was thinking we should give our socials, and I was hoping you would start with that.
Well, you can find me on minds.com at Roger_Hanson. If you want to check out the group that we're in on Minds, it's called Strange Stories. Just type in Strange Stories on Minds.com and you can find us there. I'm also on Teams at Rogers Hangout, as well as on Element Matrix at Rogers Hangout, the Quantum Gathering, and I keep forgetting the name of the other one. It's Infinite Imaginarium.
Imaginarium. Yep, that's
Yeah,
the one.
and the Infinite Imaginarium. Now, I do go on X. I'm Roger Hanson at ROGLOL1973. You can find me there, but I don't interact all that much. But that I do have an account there, and I do post whenever I remember to. So, other than that, I'm on Discord too, for the Wonderful World of Weirdness, which is the channel that we do this off of. So, that's it.
Groovy. Yeah, well, you can find me most of the places you can find Roger on the Discord, on Teams at Rogers Hangout. Of course, I'm also on Minds.com as Otto_X, that EX, by the way. And of course, you can check out my website, navakavada.org. That's NAVAKAVADA. It's spelled just like it sounds. And other than that, you might find me down at the corner or at the supermarket shopping. So if so, don't hesitate to say hello. So, all right, I am going to unfortunately turn off the automatic pilot. I'm turning on the seatbelt light. Please bring your seats to an upright position. The smoking lamp is unfortunately turned off. Stewards will be coming through to collect your rolling papers, hash pipes, or whatever paraphernalia you may have. We'll be landing shortly at Shambhala International Airport, where some of you might be deplaning or desaucering and getting on the saucer for Agartha. If you're going to New Swabia, just stay in your seats, and we'll be departing as soon as we've been refueled with helium-3. Thank you, everyone, for flying Clandestine International Airlines. We hope to see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And thank you so much today, Roger.
You too. Great show.